The largest American military installation in the Middle East came under fire, not once, not twice. For 35 straight days, 10,000 US troops lived beneath the wail of missile alarms at the very facility where Washington's aerial campaign against Iran is being orchestrated. And on day 3, Iranian strike aircraft were 2 minutes from altering the course of everything. 2 minutes. What prevented them and what failed to is a story the world was never fully told. Until now. Welcome to the War 2 Signal, the channel where we don't simply cover the conflict, we decode it. If you've been following us for some time, you already understand what we do here. But if this is your first visit, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. Think of it like this. You wouldn't abandon a newspaper halfway through a war, would you? This is your newspaper, every single day. Don't skip a single edition. And one more thing. Leave a comment telling us where in the world you're tuning in from today. We want to see exactly how far the War 2 signal is reaching. Now let's dive in. There is a stretch of desert in the Middle East that the United States simply cannot lose. It lies roughly 25 miles southwest of Doha, Qatar's capital, encircled by sand, encircled by scorching heat, and encircled for the last 35 days by relentless threat. Its name is Udeid Air Base. And if anyone wanted to grasp why this conflict has taken the shape it has, they would need to begin right here, because everything, the planning, the strikes, the decision-making, the coordination, all of it flows through this singular installation planted in the Qatari desert. Al Udeid is not merely a military base in the conventional sense. It serves as the forward deployed headquarters of United States Air Force's Central Command. It is the location where targeting decisions are formulated. It is the hub from which warplanes launch on sorties and to which they return. It is the nerve center where the entire intelligence and surveillance picture of the Persian Gulf region is collected, processed, and acted upon. Under ordinary circumstances, roughly 10,000 American service members are posted there at any given moment. 10,000 personnel at a single base in a nation that shares a maritime boundary with Iran. And when hostilities commenced, when Washington initiated Operation Epic Fury against Tehran, Al Udeid was the brain driving it all. Every bomber that lifted off toward Iranian soil, every strike package that was assembled, every aviator who sat through a mission briefing, it all originated from this facility, which is precisely why Iran resolved from the very first hour that Al Udeid had to be struck. To comprehend Iran's rationale, you have to step back and examine the broader picture. For approximately 3 decades, the US military waged its regional air campaigns from a position of total invulnerability. In Iraq in 2003, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Syria, the installations from which American aircraft operated were beyond reach. The adversaries in those wars lacked the range, the weaponry, or the capability to hit back at the infrastructure generating the strikes. Those bases were safe havens. The firepower traveled in one direction only. That was the model. That was the doctrine. And for 30 years, it held. Iran observed all of this meticulously over the years. And Iran constructed its military capabilities around one very specific question. What would it take to shatter that model? What would be required to ensure that if America ever came after Iran, the strikes would no longer flow in just one direction? The answer, Iran determined, was a sustained and methodical campaign against the architecture of American power projection in the Gulf. Not merely the planes, not just the pilots, but the radars, the fuel infrastructure, the command nodes, the bases themselves. And the most critical base of all, the one that had to be struck first, struck repeatedly and struck hard, was Al Udeid. So on the 28th of February 2026, when the initial wave of Iranian attacks was unleashed, Al Udeid was already on the target list. Smoke was observed rising from the vicinity of the base following Iranian strikes on Doha. It was the opening chapter of a campaign that would persist without interruption for 35 consecutive days. Wave after wave, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, one-way attack drones, manned bombers skimming at low altitude to evade radar detection, combinations of all these launched simultaneously, engineered to overwhelm, disorient, and ultimately breach the layered defense networks shielding the base. Iran was not executing this haphazardly. Iran was executing this according to a plan, and that plan, as the ensuing 35 days would demonstrate, was more sophisticated and more effective than the American public was ever officially informed. 10,000 American service members are currently living under circumstances that include daily air raid warnings and the sound of detonations at the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, at the command hub of a war that was supposed to be swift, decisive, and surgical. It has been none of those things, and it all traces back to what unfolded at Udeid. Most conflicts contain a moment, a single moment buried beneath the avalanche of headlines and official communiques that reveals everything about the true nature of the war. For this conflict, that moment arrived on the 2nd of March 2026, Day 3. Two Iranian Air Force Su-24 tactical bombers departed from Iranian territory and set course for a single destination, Al Udeid Air Base. They were not flying at altitude. They were not adhering to a conventional flight profile. They were hugging the earth at less than 100 feet above ground level, deliberately, precisely, because at that height, radar systems struggled to pick them up. It is a method as old as low-level combat aviation itself. Remain beneath the radar horizon, stay invisible, close the distance, strike the target before anyone realizes you are there. And it was working. The two aircraft penetrated the fringes of Qatari airspace, carrying bombs and precision-guided munitions, visually identified and photographed by sources briefed on the operation. They were not on a reconnaissance sortie. They were not issuing a warning. They were inbound, armed, and committed. They were 2 minutes from Al Udeid Air Base. 2 minutes, and then a Qatari F-15 fighter pilot made a decision. He executed the intercept. His wingman followed. The Iranian bombers were engaged and brought down before they could release a single weapon. 2 minutes. That is the margin by which 10,000 American service members at the biggest U.S. installation in the Middle East avoided being struck by conventional ordnance on day 3 of this war. Not a missile defense battery, not an American fighter jet, a Qatari pilot flying in defense of a base his nation hosts in a conflict his nation did not choose. It was, for the record, the first aerial combat engagement in the entire history of the Qatari Emiri Air Force. The pilots who downed those Iranian bombers achieved the first air-to-air kills in Qatari military history. The American media reported it as a noteworthy incident. It was a near disaster, but the Su-24 mission was only one element of what Iran had prepared for that opening phase, because on the very next day, the 3rd of March, an Iranian ballistic missile struck Al Udeid Air Base. The Qatari Ministry of Defense confirmed it. 2 missiles had been fired from Iranian territory. One was intercepted, one was not. One got through. It penetrated the air defense umbrella of a base that is supposed to rank among the most heavily fortified military installations anywhere on Earth. The Qatari statement did not specify what sustained damage. It noted there were no fatalities, which was fortunate, but a ballistic missile had impacted inside the perimeter of Al Udeid. That alone carried enormous weight. What followed was even more consequential. Subsequent reporting confirmed that the AN/FPS-132 early warning radar situated near Al Udeid at al-Daba had been struck and destroyed in the attack. The AN/FPS-132 is not a standard piece of military hardware. It is a $1.1 billion phased array radar system manufactured in the United States, capable of tracking ballistic missiles at ranges of up to 5,000 kilometers. It feeds vital early warning data into THAAD batteries, Patriot systems, and Allied defense networks spanning the entire Gulf region. When that radar went offline, everything shifted. Every American and Allied base in the Gulf suddenly had reduced warning time for inbound missiles. Every intercept window shrank. Every defense battery became marginally less effective because the long-range eyes of the entire Gulf air defense architecture had been eliminated. And here is what makes the sequence impossible to write off as coincidence. On day 1 of the conflict, THAAD radars in Jordan and the UAE were struck. On day 3, the AN/FPS-132 at Al Udeid was destroyed. Within the first 72 hours, Iran had systematically dismantled the primary long-range radar coverage across the entire Gulf theater. This was not indiscriminate targeting. This was a deliberately engineered counter-surveillance campaign. Blind the defenses, then strike freely. And that is exactly what followed. Picture spending billions of dollars engineering the most advanced missile defense systems on the planet, deploying them across an entire region, positioning them with care, testing them exhaustively, training thousands of operators to run them with precision, and then watching them fail. That is not a hypothetical. That is what has been unfolding across the Gulf for 35 consecutive days. And at the heart of that problem sits one weapon, one specific Iranian missile that has quietly rewritten the rules of this conflict in ways no official statement has been prepared to fully concede. Its designation is the Khorramshahr 4. To understand why this missile matters, you first need to understand how missile defense systems actually function. When a conventional ballistic missile is launched, it follows a predictable path. It ascends into the upper atmosphere, arcs over, and descends toward its target along what is called a ballistic trajectory. The mathematics of that descent are calculable, highly predictable in fact, and that predictability is the foundation upon which every modern missile defense system is constructed. The Patriot system tracks an incoming warhead. It computes where that warhead will be in 3 seconds. It fires an interceptor toward that exact coordinate. The interceptor meets the warhead in midair. Threat neutralized. THAAD operates on the same principle. Arrow operates on the same principle. David's sling operates on the same principle. They are all, in their own sophisticated fashion, solving the same mathematical equation, predict the terminal point, launch the interceptor, achieve the intercept. It is a system built around one foundational assumption that the incoming warhead will travel where physics dictates it should travel. The Khorramshahr 4 violates that assumption. Iran's most advanced, domestically developed ballistic missile is fitted with what analysts characterize as a maneuverable re-entry vehicle. In plain language, during the terminal phase of its descent, the warhead does not adhere to the predicted ballistic arc. It shifts, not dramatically, not by hundreds of miles, but by enough to be somewhere other than where the interceptor missile is heading. The defense system fires at the calculated terminal point. The warhead adjusts its path mid-descent. The interceptor reaches the predicted location and finds empty sky. The warhead continues to its target. This is not a theoretical weakness being debated in defense journals. This is an operational reality that has been playing out in the skies above Qatar, Bahrain, and throughout the Gulf theater for 35 days. Every Patriot battery, every THAAD installation, every aero system deployed in the region is now contending with a weapon purpose-built to defeat the fundamental logic on which they were designed, and Iran deployed this weapon against Udeid. But the Khorramshahr 4 did not operate in isolation. Iran's methodology throughout this conflict has been one of deliberate complexity. During the 57th wave of Operation Truthful Promise 4, launched around the 17th of March, the IRGC combined precision-guided Zulfikar medium-range missiles, liquid-fueled Qiyam missiles, and explosive drones into a single coordinated strike package aimed at Udeid. Simultaneously, the IRGC Navy carried out a separate joint missile and drone assault against hangars sheltering American fighter aircraft at Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain and Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE. Multiple weapons, multiple bases, multiple countries, one operational wave. The purpose behind this complexity is not arbitrary, it is calculated. A defense system that must simultaneously track ballistic missiles with maneuvering warheads, cruise missiles traveling at low altitude, and swarms of one-way attack drones across 3 distinct geographic locations is a defense system being driven toward its operational ceiling. And the figures paint an uncomfortable picture. Iranian missile accuracy has climbed to approximately 80%, against a layered defense framework specifically designed to stop 90%. That gap, the 10-point difference between design performance and real-world performance, represents missiles landing inside bases, radars going dark, infrastructure being dismantled piece by piece. And here is the detail that ties everything together. The systematic destruction of Gulf radar systems within the opening 72 hours of the conflict, the very counter-surveillance effort described earlier, directly correlates with the progressive rise in Iranian strike success rates. Fewer radars, shorter warning times, narrower intercept windows, higher Iranian accuracy. It is not coincidence, it is cause and effect. It is strategy yielding results, and at the center of that strategy, threading its maneuverable warhead through openings in a blinded defense network, is the Khorramshahr 4. There is a question that has lingered quietly beneath 35 days of headlines, beneath every missile alert, every intercepted drone, every official statement carefully crafted to avoid revealing too much. The question is this: what does Iran actually want from Udeid? Because Iran is not foolish. Iran's military strategists understand that ballistic missiles, even Khorramshahr 4 ballistic missiles, are not going to flatten a base the size of a small city. They are not going to compel 10,000 American service members to abandon their posts overnight. They are not going to terminate Operation Epic Fury with a single knockout blow. Iran knows this, which means the persistent, unrelenting 35-day campaign against Al-Udeid is not about demolition. It is about something far more deliberate. Iran's strategic calculus rests on four distinct and coherent objectives, each one amplifying the others. The first is direct operational degradation. Every Iranian missile that finds its mark inside Al-Udeid's perimeter is a missile that has damaged something: a radar installation, a fuel depot, a hangar sheltering aircraft, a command facility. Each piece of wrecked infrastructure directly diminishes America's capacity to conduct strikes against Iran. Slower sortie rates, reduced surveillance reach, compromised coordination. The base from which Operation Epic Fury is being prosecuted is simultaneously the base being systematically worn down by the very conflict it is directing. That is not a coincidence. That is the objective. The second objective is political pressure. 10,000 American service members are presently enduring conditions that include daily air raid sirens and the concussion of explosions. Stars and Stripes, the official publication of the U.S. military itself, has documented precisely these conditions at Al-Udeid. Every American casualty at this base becomes a news story. Every injury triggers a family notification. Every near miss prompts a question on Capitol Hill. The administration that initiated this conflict, expecting a brief and conclusive campaign, now finds itself justifying to the American public why the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East is absorbing incoming ballistic missiles on a daily basis. Public patience is a strategic resource, and Iran is deliberately and methodically draining America's supply, one missile wave at a time. The third objective is Qatar itself. Qatar's posture throughout this conflict has been one of the most precarious balancing acts in contemporary Gulf diplomacy. It is a U.S. treaty ally. It hosts Al-Udeid. Its air defenses have intercepted hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones aimed at the base. And yet Qatar has historically maintained carefully cultivated diplomatic and economic ties with Iran, ties it had no wish to sever. Iran targeted that equilibrium directly. Strikes on Ras Laffan, the core of Qatar's liquefied natural gas export industry, inflicted damage now estimated to affect 17% of the country's total production capacity. The projected repair timeline stretches 3 to 5 years. That economic assault moved Qatar. Doha subsequently declared Iranian military and security personnel persona non grata, giving them 24 hours to depart the country, a significant and irreversible diplomatic rupture for a state that had invested years in carefully safeguarding its relationship with Tehran. But the underlying Iranian calculation had already served its purpose. Qatar is now bearing the economic and political costs of hosting American military power in a conflict it did not select and from which it derives no tangible benefit. If those costs keep escalating, the question of how long Qatar is willing to shoulder them will inevitably be raised loudly. The fourth objective is arguably the most strategically consequential of all. Iran is not attempting to win an air-to-air contest against the United States Air Force. It recognizes that fight cannot be won. What it is attempting to do, methodically, patiently, wave by wave, is erode the infrastructure that makes the American air campaign viable in the first place. Destroy the radars, strike the fuel systems, hit the aerial refueling tankers, target the command centers, deplete the interceptor stockpiles, force American air defense assets into a permanent defensive stance rather than offensive operations, remove the fuel and the aircraft cannot fly, remove the radars and the aircraft cannot navigate, remove the coordination systems and the aircraft cannot organize their strikes. For 3 decades, American military doctrine rested on a foundational assumption that its regional bases were sanctuaries, that strikes would travel in one direction only, that the adversary could absorb American air power without possessing the means to reach back at the infrastructure producing it. That assumption is finished. Iran has reached Al-Udeid. Iran has struck Al-Udeid. And Iran will continue targeting Al-Udeid with every missile variant, every drone configuration, every coordinated wave it can mount for as long as this conflict endures. The sanctuary doctrine that defined 30 years of American military operations in the Gulf has been shattered, and it was shattered in the Qatari desert, 25 miles southwest of Doha, at a base the world is only now beginning to truly comprehend. This has been the War 2 signal. Stay informed, stay sharp, and we will see you in the next signal.